There's something that's so quintessentially Warhammer about a big, bold banner in your army. And although there are a ton of cool banner tutorials, I want to take a look at using a weird technique I learned in art school and seeing if it can apply to Warhammer. What I'm talking about is image transfers, and in particular, I want to take an image, print it out, and then transfer it to a Warhammer banner. But before anything, we're going to have to make a printout. And luckily, if you don't have photo editing software, you can always go on to photop.com, which is like a browser-based Photoshop clone. Once in there, we're going to want to click New Project, and the important thing here is to make sure that the DPI is at 300, as this is the standard resolution for print, and then from there we'll use our typical paper dimensions. If you're in the US, it's going to be 8.5 by 11 inches, and I think everywhere else is probably going to be A4. Once we have our blank page ready, we can paste in our favorite rights-free image that's safe to use on YouTube. From here, we're going to create a mask by clicking on this little circle in a rectangle icon. This allows us to create transparent areas by painting on the mask with the color black and undoing it with white. We're going to try out some of the brushes until we find a nice texture we like, and then click and drag all around the border to create a more deckled edge that should hopefully blend into the banner more so than a hard edge would. Once we're happy with how it looks, just right click on our image over here in the layers panel and turn it into a smart object. This will allow you to resize it freely without worrying about a loss of quality when you go from small to large. And then I just create a variety of sizes. It is important to note though that for this technique you need a printout from a laser printer, not inkjet. But luckily this is what most offices have, so huge shout out to my friend Patrick for printing this out for me as I don't currently work in an office. To get ready, I prepared several canvases, some plasticard and others prime shapes of aluminum I cut from seltzer cans. Please be careful doing this and wear safety goggles as it does create little slivers of aluminum which could be dangerous. The first thing I wanted to try was using a blender ad marker from Charpak. I cut out one of my images and secured it image side down with painter's tape onto one of my plasticard banners. I ran my marker over the backside, saturating it and applying pressure. Normally the chemical in this marker would lift the print off the page and deposit it onto the other surface, but unfortunately it was just melting my plasticard. Definitely not ideal, but I kind of expected this and moved over to the primed aluminum, hoping I wouldn't get a similar reaction. Turns out the chemical inside the marker is a pretty strong solvent, and it was just turning the primer into a gooey mess. Kind of a bummer, but I did find out you can use the marker to glue plastic miniatures together. So that's pretty cool, but not sure what the actual application for this would be, as I wouldn't really trust it long term, but I thought it was interesting enough to share, and perhaps it'd be useful for small parts that just need a thin amount of glue. This marker is also super fumey, so I'd definitely open a window while you use it. While the marker ended up being kind of a bust, I did notice that it was fusing the image right to the plasticard, which reminded me of another way to transfer images. This time we're going to be using matte medium, which is a super versatile acrylic medium that you can find in most art stores. I first prepped my plasticard with a thin layer of matte medium and left it to dry. After this, I applied a layer all over. This is what ends up transferring the image, so make sure you spread it out enough to capture the whole thing. Then place the image face down right onto the wet matte medium, squishing out the excess, and begin working out the wrinkles and imperfections. I use what's called a bone folder to do this, but you can use anything really. There's kind of a fine balance here in that you definitely want to remove the excess matte medium, but make sure there's enough in there to adhere the image and transfer the visual. After I did my initial pass, I found myself checking the edges and adding more where it wasn't sticking. After waiting several hours for the matte medium to thoroughly dry, you can add a bit of water, let it soak in, and start to rub away the paper, leaving the image behind stuck in the matte medium. This is a gradual process and it won't happen all in one step, so it's best to go slow, adding water when you need it. There may be a tiny bit of paper pulp left behind, creating a bit of texture, but I found that I kind of liked it, blending it into the banner and making it seem like a bit of fabric. Moving forward, I realized that the matte medium transfer didn't adhere as well to the primer as it did to the dried layer of matte medium. This surprised me, but nevertheless I continued, working gently to reduce the amount of damage to the image. Going slowly and taking my time, I found that working from the center outward helped reduce tearing and still produce great results, making me wish I went a little slower on the unprimed version. The aluminum shapes were super easy to bend, using dowel-shaped things on my desk like paintbrush handles to help bend them and give them curves as if they were blowing in the wind. The plastic card was harder to get into such dramatic shapes. I tried using hot water to bad results, so I just stuck with forming it with my hands. And while this was super fun, I think the true sauce is that you can use the same technique to transfer images to pre-existing bits. I took this banner piece and added a thin layer of matte medium, letting it dry, and then went about adding another layer of wet matte medium followed by my image. Since this surface is way more curved, I used my paintbrush handle and other tools to make sure the paper was as flush to the surface as possible, working it into the curves and getting rid of bumps and excess medium. I was super gentle in removing this one, working super slowly and trying to be mindful of minimizing damage. And then all that was left was to paint my banners. To deal with the areas where the transfer wasn't perfect, I applied a variety of approaches. On some, I leaned into the weathering, covering it with mud and dirt, while others I left them alone. This sort of reminded me of a damaged painting with canvas or fabric showing through. On the actual banner bit though, I did a bit of color matching and painted out the scene to blend into the rest of the banner. If you're finding that you've got a bit of paper fuzz that's distracting, I found that hitting it with some of this golden satin varnish helped to make the paper look more wet, eliminating some of the more stubborn bits. This worked better than adding a layer of matte medium or my typical miniature varnish, but that being said, none of the results I'm about to show have an extra layer of medium or varnish on them, as I just wanted to show the real deal. I think this is a super fun and easy way to get some really stellar looking banners, allowing some really ornate imagery to transfer right over. This method probably lends itself to a slightly weathered or grungy look. If you want something perfect and pristine, you're probably better off ordering some water slide transfers or turning in a richer gray. But for everyone else, I think this is a super slick way to make your banners look however you imagine them to be. Also, you may have noticed the bump in quality on my audio, and that's all thanks to my girlfriend Amalia for gifting me a microphone for Christmas, so huge thank you to her, and a huge thank you to all of you for watching the video. Hope you learned something new.